from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore, to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it is so good to be here. Just let me say that as I've sat here, I have found myself to be grateful for having lived long enough to recall, lived here 70 years on this planet, long enough to become a great-grandmother, and to really appreciate the importance of this legislation that's before us, and also lived long enough to sit at the feet of those people who lived through the Depression, who lived through other periods of time where the economy was contracting. And I say that to say, Mr. Chairman, that I feel like I'm in an episode of that TV program that came out in the 90s called Sliders, where you think that you've slid into a different reality. We have heard people wax on here today about how once upon a time, there was a time when if you just worked hard, there would be upward mobility, and you could earn more than your parents earned. And of course, I do recall such a time. That is no longer true in the United States. I can remember a point in time when, but upward mobility has fallen sharply. 90% of the children born in 1940 earned more than their parents. And so those folks who've talked about that today are people who are sort of telling their ages here. And now, a child born in 1989 has only 50% chance of earning more than their parents. You know, there was a time, I remember, I was alive when President Kennedy talked about a rising tide lifting all boats. But that's no longer true. Our GDP, which may have grown during the 1980s up to 2005, wages for workers stagnated. You know, wages for 90% of those people who work, the lower 90%, only rose by 0.3 percentage points versus those who are at 0.1% of the income strata quadrupled. And that kind of income inequality really imperils our democracy. It is very, very dangerous. The only time that our economy has experienced such inequality as it's experienced now was when we faced the Great Depression, the Great Recession, and now. So that income inequality is very, very trying. So when we start talking about building back better, what we have learned is that this whole trickle-down theory just doesn't work. We have heard people wax on today about how important it has been to provide the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, similar kind of tax cuts to businesses versus providing, the child tax credit, which lifted half of our children in America out of poverty. And what has the evidence shown us? We've had the Reagan tax cuts, we've had both the Bush tax cuts, we've had the Tax Cuts and Job Act, and what we have seen is that, you know, companies simply buy back stocks, they pay off their shareholders, they lay off people, or either those wages stagnate, and inequality grows. Tax Cut and Job Acts, we just put $2 trillion on the credit card. And so I feel like I'm in a Sliders episode when I hear about initiatives like the child tax credit that puts money directly back into the economy as being the reason that we won't prevail. I just want to close before my time is up to talk about the so-called dignity of work. That's like hearing a fingernail on a chalkboard. That's the same kind of rhetoric they've always used to describe the situation of welfare recipients. I mean, you're supposed to just go to work, take any old kind of job, even if you have no child care, if you have no affordable child care, if you're putting your kids in a situation where the teachers are going to have no masks, They're not going to be safe. You don't have a livable wage. You can afford transportation to the school and no family leave, no time off. I can remember once when my children, all three of them, had chicken pox, and there was no paid leave for relatives. And I called up and cursed out my employer, cursed out the kids' fathers' employers, because there I was wanting to go to work and unable to do so without losing pay. You know, trickle down doesn't work. We're building back better. And as Emmanuel says of Berkeley, California, University of California said, you know, when your theory is contradicted by the evidence, you got to go with the evidence. And we're going with the evidence in this proposal today. And thank you for your
Thank the
indulgence.
gentlelady. Let me
Yield back.
recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Dr. Winstrup.